The Haunted House of Amityville. A terrifying true story in American history. Many murders and ghost stories have haunted people, but none are as disturbing and horrifying as the Haunted House of Amityville. This story began with a gruesome massacre and later became a nightmare for anyone who set foot in this house. The bloody tragedy on a fateful night on November 13th, 1974, at 112 Ocean Avenue, Amityville, New York. A shocking event took place that shook the entire nation. Ronald DeFeo Jr., a 23-year-old man, used a Marlin .35 caliber rifle to slaughter his entire family while they were asleep. The 6 victims were Ronald DeFeo Sr., his father, shot twice in the back; Louise DeFeo, his mother, shot twice in the head; Dawn DeFeo, his 18-year-old sister; Allison DeFeo, his 13-year-old sister; Mark DeFeo, his 12-year-old brother; John DeFeo, his youngest brother, just 9 years old. All of them were shot in their sleep, with no signs of struggle or any attempt to escape. Strangely, no neighbors heard the gunshots that night, even though the rifle had no silencer. This raised suspicions that Ronald was not acting alone, and that some supernatural force had influenced him. When arrested, Ronald claimed, "I heard voices telling me to kill them." He said that every night he heard whispering, footsteps moving in the hallway, and felt something was watching him. He also reported seeing a pair of glowing red eyes staring at him from the darkness, urging him to kill. He was sentenced to life in prison, but the mysteries of 112 Ocean Avenue were far from over. 2. The Lutz family and their 28 days of horror. After the massacre, the house was sold at a shockingly low price. The Lutz family, George and Kathy Lutz, along with their 3 children, decided to move in on December 18, 1975. They did not believe in ghosts, but within days their nightmare began, a series of terrifying events. A horrible stench. The house constantly smelled like rotting flesh, no matter how much they cleaned. Strange noises, whispering voices echoed at night, along with the sound of footsteps moving down the hall. Every night at 3:15 a.m., the exact time of the murders, George Lutz woke up suddenly without explanation, doors and windows opening on their own. Despite being locked, they would find their doors wide open every morning. One night, George saw a tall black figure standing at the doorway, but when he turned on the light, it vanished instantly. Water turning black. Kathy Lutz was terrified when the bath water suddenly turned black and emitted a foul, rotten smell. Glowing eyes in the dark. Their youngest son, Daniel Lutz, 5 years old, spoke to an invisible entity named Jody. One night, Kathy looked out the window and saw a massive pig with glowing red eyes staring at her. But when she rushed outside, nothing was there. George's personality changed. Once a kind man, he became distant and aggressive, spending hours staring blankly at the house's windows, as if being controlled by something. A ghostly reflection. One day, Kathy looked into a mirror and saw an old woman with lifeless white eyes staring back at her. The next morning, bruises appeared on her body without any explanation. Terrified, the family called a priest to perform an exorcism. But as soon as he entered, an unseen voice screamed at him, "Get out!" Suddenly, the priest was slapped by an invisible force and ran out in horror. He later warned that the house was possessed by evil spirits. On January 14, 1976, after a night filled with screams, objects levitating, and ghostly hands emerging from the walls, the Lutz family fled the house in the middle of the night, leaving all their belongings behind. Unsolved mysteries. After the Lutz family left, numerous investigators and paranormal experts visited the house. One team captured a photo of a ghostly young boy with glowing eyes, believed to be the spirit of John DeFeo, the 9-year-old victim. While some skeptics claim the story was exaggerated for fame and fortune, many paranormal researchers insist that 12 Ocean Avenue remains one of the most haunted houses in America. The house has changed owners many times, yet no one has ever lived there for long. Would you dare to visit this house at 3:15 a.m.? The Haunted House of Villisca, an unsolved massacre. If you think the Amityville house is terrifying, then the Haunted House of Villisca will send even more chills down your spine. This place is not just the site of a gruesome mass murder, but also one of the most haunted houses in America, where the spirits of the victims seem to linger, unable to find peace. The Night of Horror in 1912, on the night of June 9th to the early morning of June 10th, 1912, in the small town of Villisca, Iowa. A brutal crime took place in the home of the Moore family. 8 people were horrifically murdered that night. Josiah B. Moore, 43 years old, the father, killed with an axe. Sarah Moore, 39 years old, his wife attacked in the same way. Herman Moore, 11 years old. Catherine Moore, 10 years old. Boyd Moore, 7 years old. And Paul Moore, 5 years old. Their 4 children. Ina Stillinger, 8 years old. And Lena Stillinger, 12 years old. 2 friends of the family who had stayed over and tragically became victims. The most chilling part? All of them were murdered using an axe found in the Moore home, yet the killer left behind no clear evidence. All victims were attacked while sleeping, except for Lena Stillinger, who was found lying out of place with signs of struggle, suggesting she might have woken up before being killed. Several eerie details make this case even more mysterious. All mirrors in the house were covered with white cloth, as if the killer didn't want to see their own reflection. No signs of forced entry. The doors were locked from the inside. A kerosene lamp was left at the foot of each victim's bed. Why did the killer need light like this? A bowl of bloody water was found on the table. Did the murderer wash their hands after the crime? All windows were blocked with clothes or blankets, as if the killer didn't want anyone outside to see inside. And the most terrifying fact? The murderer was never caught. More than a century has passed, and the case remains one of the most horrifying unsolved mysteries in history. The haunted house, spirits that never left after the massacre. The house stood abandoned for years, but the horrors never stopped. Terrifying paranormal activity. Shadowy figures at night. Many locals have reported seeing dark shapes moving past the windows, even when the house was completely empty. Heavy footsteps echoing. Some claim to hear slow, heavy footsteps on the wooden floor, as if the killer still roams the house. Children's laughter. Visitors have heard soft giggling and whispers of children, but upon checking, they found no one there. Doors opening and slamming shut by themselves, even without wind. Doors mysteriously swing open or slam shut as if some invisible force is moving them. Flickering lights in the dead of night. People walking by have seen lights flashing inside, even though the house has no electricity. A pair of glowing red eyes. Some have sworn that while passing by at night, they saw 2 bright red eyes staring out from the second-floor window. Paranormal investigators have recorded eerie evidence, including whispers captured on audio devices. In one chilling case, a recorder picked up a faint child's voice saying, "Help me." 3. the unsolved. Mystery over the years, many theories have emerged about the killer's identity, but no one was ever convicted. Some of the top suspects included a mysterious drifter who was seen in town on the night of the murders and later disappeared, a local preacher who reportedly suffered from severe mental illness and claimed that God's voice told him to kill the Moor family, a serial killer who had committed similar crimes in the region, but no evidence was strong enough, and the case remains one of America's greatest unsolved horrors. Today, the Villisca Axe Murder House is a famous destination for paranormal enthusiasts. Many believe that the spirits of the victims still haunt the house, unable to move on. Would you dare to spend a night in this house? The house is now open for visitors, and brave souls can even book an overnight stay. But many who tried have fled in terror, claiming they felt a chilling presence whispers in their ears, and the sensation of being watched from the darkness. Some visitors have even woken up with mysterious scratches on their bodies and reported feeling an invisible hand touch them while they slept. So, what about you? Would you dare step into the Villisca Axe Murder House at midnight? The demonic infestation of the Smurl House, a true story of hell on earth. If there is one place where true evil exists, it is the Smurl House, one of the most terrifying hauntings in American history. This was not just a case of flickering lights or ghostly whispers, but a full-scale demonic infestation so powerful that even exorcisms failed, and renowned paranormal investigators Ed and Lorraine Warren struggled to contain it. What happened in this house wasn't just supernatural. It was a war between a family and something far beyond human comprehension. The nightmare begins in 1974. Jack and Janet Smurl, along with their 4 daughters, moved into a rundown duplex in West Pittston, Pennsylvania. The house had been standing since the 1860s and had a dark history that the Smurls were unaware of. Almost immediately, strange and unexplainable events began occurring. A foul stench, a disgusting odor, like rotting flesh and sulfur, would suddenly fill rooms, a smell often associated with demonic activity. Unnerving noises. They heard pounding on the walls, heavy dragging sounds on the floors, and disembodied voices whispering their names. Objects moving on their own. Dishes crashed to the floor. Furniture shifted overnight. The TV would turn on and off by itself, and lights flickered erratically. Dark shadows lurking. At first, just faint glimpses, but over time they became clearer, taller, and more menacing. And then, the true horror began. The demon reveals itself, from a haunting to a nightmare. As the months passed, the activity in the Smurl house grew violent. This was no ordinary haunting. It was an intelligent, malicious entity that wanted to harm them. Terrifying apparitions. One night, Janet awoke to see a grotesque, rotting face with hollow, glowing red eyes staring at her from the ceiling. Physical attacks. Jack was thrown across rooms, scratched deep into his back, while Janet was dragged out of bed by an invisible force. Whispering voices. At night, they heard deep, guttural voices whispering, laughing, and calling out to them in a language they did not understand. Sexual assault by the entity. One of the most horrifying aspects was that both Jack and Janet were attacked in their sleep. Janet described feeling paralyzed, unable to breathe, as something unseen pressed against her body. Jack was also assaulted by a shadowy figure, leaving him traumatized and terrified. At this point, the Smurls knew this wasn't just a ghost. This was something far worse. Edie and Lorraine Warren step in, and even they struggle, desperate for help. The Smurls reached out to Ed and Lorraine Warren, the world-famous demonologists. The moment Lorraine stepped inside, she felt a presence unlike any other. Lorraine confirmed that the house was infested by not just one, but several entities. One of them, a powerful demon. Ed Warren claimed to hear inhuman growls coming from inside the walls. When they set up recording equipment, they captured chilling sounds, screams, whispers, and what sounded like an ancient curse being spoken. A priest attempted an exorcism, but instead of weakening the entity, it only made things worse. The final nightmare, a battle against pure evil on night, Janet woke up to a terrible presence in the room. She opened her eyes and saw a massive 7-foot-tall shadow with burning red eyes standing at the foot of her bed. It stared at her and growled a single word: mine. The entire house began to shake violently. Walls cracked, objects flew through the air, and a thunderous roaring sound filled the space. Janet screamed in horror as she felt an invisible force pin her down, whispering in a demonic voice she couldn't understand. Jack tried to help, but he was lifted and slammed into the wall with brutal force, knocking him unconscious. Their children cried and screamed, terrified beyond words. At sunrise, the Smurl family packed whatever they could and fled the house forever. What happened to the house? Several more exorcisms were performed, but the dark energy never fully left. Priests who attempted to cleanse the house reported feeling physically sick and overwhelmed by an unseen force. Years later, the home was renovated and resold, but some who lived there afterward claim to still feel something watching them. To this day, no one knows if the demon was truly banished, or if it simply waits for new victims. Would you dare enter the Smurl house? The Smurl family endured nearly 2 decades of torment, and even after moving away, they believed the demon followed them. Some say that once a demon marks you, it never lets go. What if it's still lurking in the darkness, waiting, watching?